Hello students, another week has flown by, which must mean it's time for another episode of the IELTS Plus English podcast. Can you believe it? It's episode 37 today. That means we've been doing this podcast for almost 3/4 of a year. I was really shocked to see we're already episode 37. And it only seems like a few weeks ago we were doing episode 1 about animals. Well, a lot has changed, and I hope you're still enjoying it. We've done so many topics. I think it's been a really comprehensive series, and I hope it's beneficial for you, especially if you are taking the IELTS exam. So you know, there's only 4 episodes left of this season. Okay, so there's 40 topics total. We will go to the end of 40 topics. I think we'll do a few extras because some people have requested me to do some topics that I don't normally include in IELTS, such as politics and religion. I'm not sure what I will cover, but maybe a few bonus episodes. And then it's the end of season 1. And then I have to think about how to approach season 2 of the podcast. So, of course, if you have any requests or ideas, feel free to let me know in the comments on YouTube or however you reach me. So, we have a topic today that is transportation. Not bad, quite an easy topic, I think. I have my 10 vocabulary and expressions, which you can find on www.jax-english.com. Or if you are in Korea, please head over to my Naver Cafe, which is Jax English Yongguk Yongo. And I think we'll get straight into it today. So you know what I need to do. I always need to warm up with some part 1 questions because they're easier. The first question is, what's the most popular means of transportation in your hometown? Well, I live in Seoul, and I don't know what the most popular form of transportation is, but I see a lot of people take buses and a lot of people take the subway. And because taxis are cheap and convenient, I think a lot of people do take taxis, which is quite different to England, where I come from. But for me, mostly I take the subway. Good, okay. One more question for part 1. Is driving to work popular in your country? I think using the car to commute is pretty common. A lot of people don't actually like public transportation, even though it's so wonderful here. They like the privacy of their car and they like to listen to music in there. So yeah, I think it's quite common to drive to work. Right, well, very short and simple. I think that's more than enough for part 1. Don't worry about saying so much for part 1 because there will be so many follow-up questions in part 1. You will end up answering 7 or 8 questions in total. So don't worry about going too long. We leave the long answers for part 3 particularly. But before we get to that, let's do a part 2. So I need my timer, which has 2 minutes, and I am going to answer the question, describe a method of transport that you enjoy using. Okay, well, I think I'll just talk about what's important in my life. So let's do 2 minutes starting now. I'd like to tell you about the subway in Korea, in Seoul, Korea. When I first came to Korea, I started taking the subway, and it was really comfortable, cheap, easy to get from A to B, so there were a lot of positives. However, I did actually suffer from motion sickness. So every time I took the subway, I remember the movement of the subway made me feel quite nauseous. But, you know, after some time, I started to get used to it, and I did prefer it to taking the bus because on the bus it's particularly bumpy and you often have to stand up. So let me tell you a little more about the Seoul subway system. It's an incredible network of I don't know, 25 lines, something like that. There's a huge number of lines that go all over the city. It's very modern, it's clean, it's convenient, it's easy to use. That's the most important thing, even if you're a foreigner like me, and you don't even need to speak Korean. You know, it's very well signposted in English. So there's so many positives about the subway system. To be honest, I can't even think of a negative point, and it only gets better every year. Every year they are adding to the lines, making new lines or extending current lines. And where I live, they will be extending it quite a number of stations, which I'm very excited for. For me personally, it's a great way to get around because, as I said, it's cheap, which really makes it much better than driving and taking a taxi. It just seems to be the cheapest way to get around the city. In the future... Okay, great. Yeah, that was, I think that's a really good answer. I tell you what came to my mind while I was answering is a lot of my students here in my academy love the word convenient. Now, please notice that I only used convenient. I think I only used convenient once, maybe twice, but I think once in that answer. And it's just such a common word for my students. You know, the subway is convenient, the bus is convenient, this office is convenient, my house is convenient. Just be careful with that word. What I always suggest is don't try and find a synonym. Try to be more specific. What do you mean by convenient? So it's easy to use. It's maybe talk about the price. Maybe talk about its proximity to something. Oh, my house is very close to the shops. Don't be vague and keep using the word convenient. Good. Okay, that's my tip for today. Let's do some part threes. What are the pros and cons of low-cost air travel? Oh, okay. Well, the obvious answer is that the main pro, is it's cheap. It really is so cheap to go to normally local destinations. So if you live in England, it will be a destination within Europe. But you can pay just, £50 to go to a country quite far away, like Spain, for example. On the other hand, there are negatives. I would say the main negative is that it's cramped, and so there's not much leg room, it's uncomfortable, and you're not provided with food generally. So yes, that's a negative, but you kind of have to accept that for the price. Okay, one quick tip again is when they ask for pros and cons, obviously they're asking for plural, right? They want lots, pros and cons. Don't list. Pick one main pro, pick one main con. That's a much easier way to deal with those questions. Good. Okay, next question. Has travel become safer in recent years than in the past? I think on the whole, yes, it has. It depends on the type of transport and the location. Is it on a road? Is it in the sky? I think planes have become safer, for example. I think things have become maybe a little... I don't know if it's become safer for pedestrians, but my big concern is the emissions that come from cars and buses. So perhaps in some ways it's more dangerous for pedestrians because they're breathing in this very toxic air. But overall, and especially because of electric cars, I think generally things are getting safer. Okay, I used some key words and expressions there, so please check that out in the handout. Let's do our last question for today. How do you think people will travel in the future? I can only speculate, but I think that there's going to be a lot more air travel. They're talking about making these air taxis, which I think would be a very economical way to get around, because perhaps they wouldn't be using so much fuel on the roads and they can kind of go from A to B in a more direct line. So that would be very exciting. And then, of course, we do see these things that Elon Musk is working on, things like these underground tunnels, which will get you across the city very quickly, or city to city very, very quickly. So I think the future is really bright for transportation. Okay, right. I will wrap it up there. So study hard this week, go over the handout, review, do all the things that you should do to be a good IELTS student. And I'll be back next week to talk about travel and holidays. So another really fun topic. I think for a lot of students, this will be one of the favorite episodes, travel and holidays. So really looking forward to that. So have a wonderful week. Take care, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.